Welcome to Productive Joy with Dr. Christy, where fun meets action.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Productive Joy. You are in for such a treat today. I have my friend Altair Gonzalez with me, and we are going to go all different directions. But before we get there, I want you to do a couple things. Make sure you're following this podcast and sharing it with other people. Y'all, I am blessed with so many amazing friends, and they want to share their story with you, but they can't share their story with you if you're not following this podcast. So do me that favor, follow, share, and make sure that you are getting your little shot of B12 from these fabulous humans. Speaking of fabulous humans, the human that we have with us here today is a dog mom. She's a world traveler. She's an event extraordinaire. She's also a community volunteer and a fun finder for the people around her. And today, Altair is going to find some fun for us. So, Altair, welcome to Productive Joy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I'm so proud of you for doing this.
Thanks. I'm having an awful lot of fun. And you and I are kind of happenstance friends, which I love, but we've now been friends for 3 or 4 years. But a friend of mine, Kelsey Stevens, who is also on this podcast, introduced me to you because you do create these fabulous events. And we've just been fast friends. And I learn something from you every time I talk to you. And now my listeners get to do the same. I'm so excited for that. So here's the reality. People only listen for the first 30 seconds or so, and then they're like, yeah, I'm not really interested. So what would you say to my listeners so that they'll know that this is one they can't miss?
So I would say stay on because you get to hear about how do you need to be ready every time a new opportunity comes. Whether you know it's coming or not, just staying ready, staying in touch with what's going on around you, with your education, with your team, just always ready for whatever is to come.
I love that. And I've watched you do it. I've watched you just kind of flow with things. So, like I said, you and I have had the experience of doing events together where you've brought me in as a speaker, but you had run the entire event. And I would say ready is a perfect description for you because when the food doesn't show up or this happens or that happens, you just kind of move with it. Nobody else would ever know there was a problem. So, when you say be ready, can you give me kind of a description of what that's looked like in your life?
Yeah. So being ready, especially when it comes to events, it's a lot about being adaptable.
Mm.
So you control your controllables and you in life and in an event, maybe you education might be, going back to school like I did a couple of years ago, but it might also look like if we're gonna do a conference, knowing exactly where things are, who do you need to talk to, and having all your resources at hand. So when it comes to being ready, it's having all that knowledge ready at your fingertips, but also being adaptable.
Mm.
Because a lot of things happen, whether at an event or in life, at the very last minute. And we can either take it easy and go with the flow, or we can just say, hey, where are my resources?
Yeah.
How can I find the solution to this that maybe nobody else has thought of that can work? So that's what I mean by being adaptable, just going with the flow, learning your resources, and really surround yourself with a wonderful team. Because
Yeah.
sometimes when you don't have the solution, somebody else will.
I love the way you framed that because you don't have to have all the answers. You just
Mm-mm.
have to have the right resources and the right people on your team that can find the answers. So, you and I, a few years back, or maybe, I guess it's been that long, talked about the Enneagram, and we're both Enneagram sevens. So, for those of you that haven't been listening for long, I do a review of the different personality tests, and the Enneagram is one of them. There are 9, but you and I are both sevens, which is that enthusiastic optimist. And one of the things that we do well is we don't necessarily live in the moment, which is not always a good thing. However, in your job, you don't always live in the moment because you're thinking about the next thing. You're already planning ahead for, oh, and if this doesn't happen, then I can do this. And it's like putting a puzzle together. But you haven't always done that in the space that you're doing it now. You're doing it in the healthcare space now. But you had a pretty cool past that got you to this
Yeah.
point. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I started, it's kind of fun. So way back when I started in my career, I was doing events for large corporations, but these were fun events. So think 500 people going out to the Caribbean and renting pirate boats and just having so much fun. And while I loved it, and I think this kind of goes back to being ready for that next step. While I loved it, I knew that that wasn't going to be sustainable. I was not going to be able to do that for the rest of my life. And at that moment, I said, "What is my next step? What do I need to do next that I could do for the rest of my life?" Because I love events, I love people, I love the energy, and I wanted to stay within it, but I knew that the logistical side of it was not going to be sustainable for a long time. And that's when I came across content and learning, doing the research and creating agendas for folks to learn. And my first job in that sense, I applied, I had no idea, but I said, you know what? Other people do it. Let me just read a little bit about this. So I did, and I said, I'm just going to try. What's the worst they're gonna say no, or they can love me. And what if they do love me? And what if they do like it? And what if I'm really good at it?
Yeah.
So I ended up applying for this job down about an hour and a half away from me, and I got it. And it was doing conferences on anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and human trafficking all over the world. I'm in my mid
Hold on.
20s.
Like that. Wait, we got to back up. So your first job was to go to these exotic places and plan
Yes,
parties like for
yes,
organizations
yes.
when their top sellers, sold X number, then these 500 people got to go
And
party.
we're just having a really great time.
Yeah, which sounds great, but in theory, when you do that week after week after week, it's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't be in the Caribbean all the time. You can't, be on a vacation. I'm putting that in air quotes all the time. But then you said, no, you know what? I think I could learn money laundering, anti-money laundering. Obviously, we're not
Anti-money laundering, yes.
anti. The anti is important. Anti-money laundering and helping with like that's a huge shift. What
It
gave you
was a
the
huge shift.
confidence to do that? What gave you the, "I can do this"?
It was it's a couple of things. So, I am not from here. I'm Venezuelan, and immigrant parents are always my mother was always saying, "Of course you can do it.
Hmm,
What do you mean you can't do it? Everybody else is doing it. Of course you can." And I think being an immigrant child, you have that responsibility to succeed.
yeah,
And not their idea of success is being a doctor or whatever it is. But for my family, luckily, their idea of success was just be happy, but be successful, the happiness that you want to have.
yeah,
And at that moment, when I figured out that this is what I wanted to do and I knew nothing about it, was for myself getting ready, studying, spending a lot of time doing the research and talking to people, but knowing in my heart that failure wasn't going to be an option.
mm,
Like I don't have that as an option. The option is to work very hard and to do it. Luckily, I was surrounded by amazing people because you don't do anything by ourselves.
no,
Luckily, I was surrounded by very, very, very good people who supported me and pushed me. And again, it goes back to that mentality of I'm just going to adapt to something new. I'm going to keep my heart and my mind open to learn. And you just get good at it once you keep going and going and going. You're going to make mistakes along the way. And I made a million. I just try not to make the same mistake over and over and over
ah,
again. So
that's
just
important.
ready mistake all the time.
Brand new mistakes. We make new mistakes
Every
every
time.
day. Well, and I think, you mentioned failure wasn't an option, but we have to fail in order to succeed. It's more about failing forward and recognizing, okay, I made this mistake. I'm not going to make that one again. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to grow from it. And that's probably the number one thing I've seen out of you, Altair, is you you exude that to everybody around you too. It's not just you. I've watched you build your team up and I've watched you help them see their superpowers and see, you know what? No, you can do this. This might not feel like it's in your wheelhouse, but I trust you. I believe in you and I'm going to help you get to that point. And it's clear that your mom did that for you. How great. And
Yeah.
your grandparents. And I'm sure you were surrounded by a wonderful community that took care of you and said, you know what, I know that you can do these great things. And now you've replicated that in the workspace, but you've also replicated that in your community. I happen to know you were rather involved with a very wonderful organization. Why don't you tell us what you're president of in your spare time?
Of course, to during when I'm not running conferences, I am the president of the Junior League of Greater Fort Lauderdale, which means that I lead the board and a group of about 300 volunteers in Broward County. And we've been around for probably almost 90 years at this point.
Wow.
We look at the community and we're trying to find where their needs are and we try to fulfill those needs. And part of our mission is development and for women and leadership training. So it's my passion. I love that I get to inspire and empower other women to find their love for the community and inspiring volunteers. It's a task, but I love it. I love what we get to do, and I love the results that we get to see in the community. And I love when a woman realizes her own power
Mm.
and through the trainings that we do and through the advocacy work that we do. But when she stands in front of a room and she's like, "Oh, we get to do this for you." That is my favorite part when we get to empower these women to find their own love for the community.
Ugh. Okay, so my favorite question to ask is totally, you just totally led me into the question because I think you're going to have some pretty awesome answers. What would you say is your definition of productive joy then?
When it comes to either work or the volunteers, it's finding where their love is.
Mm.
And so I'll give you an example. Sometimes I have folks in my team where their love is to write. And I want to create a space where their love shines so they feel empowered. When it comes to the volunteers, it is when they're able to find their love for their community. So volunteering doesn't feel like a job. It
Mm.
feels like just an extension of who they are. And that becomes their productive joy for them. I mean, for me too.
Well, and again, I've watched you do it, and it is hard to get volunteers to do much of anything because they don't have to, right? Like you have zero things to hold over their head. They don't have to show up. They don't have to do a good job once they're there. But I've watched your people, like so I got to speak at your junior league, and when I did, I watched them float in and literally create an atmosphere in like 4 minutes because so many women had a hand in actually creating the space, right? So it wasn't one person's job to set up the room. It was 10 women's job to set up the room because you recognize the value of delegation and giving people responsibility so that they will carry forward with whatever it is. You're very, very good at that. I've watched you do that in your events and in your volunteer space. So what advice would you have for a leader, women or otherwise, who is trying to motivate people to do the thing, whatever the thing is, whether it's volunteer or paid positions? People aren't always very motivated to do it well and right. How do you get people to do that?
I think creating a connection first with the person is key. Getting to know what they want out of it, getting to know what their passions are, that active listening. And it doesn't take 5 weeks to get to know somebody. It just takes one or two really good conversations where your heart and your mind is open to them. And they can feel that. Once they know that you are invested, they they're more willing to do the thing for you. And sometimes it starts doing the thing for you until they love it and they do it for themselves.
Right.
And so there's a little bit of accountability along the way, but creating that connection and creating that space, that safe space for the both of you to to show gratitude makes a really huge difference. And
Well, and
obviously, not
Yeah, go
everybody
ahead.
can do it right the first time, but really work with them and show them the way. And I think once people realize that you care and that you listen and that you're there, it makes a really big difference.
It does, and that's both work and volunteer space. I think what I heard you say is know your people, and I don't think you can know your people until you know yourself. So I think you know what you're good at and where your strengths lie, and then you surround yourself with people who have different strengths and different skill sets. But then you let people bloom in those spaces. You're not asking people to do the thing they hate the most. You're asking them to do the thing you know they'll succeed in and you know that they'll love. And that's often missed. And, I think that the purpose of this podcast is for leaders to have a new way of doing things. And I don't think this is a novel way to do things. I think this is a rare way to do things where you are one, taking the time to really get to know your people, and then two, leveraging that knowledge to shift how you do business. I know that you've done that a few times where you said, okay, this person is not best suited for this position, but what are they good at? And where could I utilize their talents and how could I utilize their talents differently? What advice would you have for people who have a couple people on their team who are on the wrong bus or maybe just in the wrong seat on the right bus? What do you do when that's true?
I think, again, I think it goes back to that connection because, and knowing how to give feedback.
Mm,
That has been a big topic of learning for me, because once you get to know the person that you are giving feedback to, you know what's going to work for them. Some people respond better to a little bit of a softer approach. Some people respond better to a little bit more of a direct approach. And taking the time as a leader to understand where the strengths lie for your team, it's where that's going to give you the hint of whether they're the right path or the wrong path. And they could be in the wrong path only because they don't know a few things. That maybe they just need a little bit of training. Or once you learn what they're good at, shift them a little bit
yeah.
and give them a different way of doing things, a different task that you know that they're going to be successful. And one of the things that I've been really working on as a leader is empowering those who lead. Because I can sit here and say, yes, I'm going to do this for my team, but my team may be five, but they have 20 people underneath them. So if I can empower my five people to do this for their each 20, it's going to make a really big difference. And I see that with the volunteers a lot
Mhm.
when I'm able to empower my board to give the women accountability, to give them feedback, to give them love and care and empathy, especially when it comes to being a volunteer. They because I'm giving it to them, they're able to give it to others. And that has been a huge game changer as a leader, especially for my volunteer organization.
So I know this is a tough question, but I'm curious as to the answer. So how did you figure that out? I know you're a world traveler. You go all over the world by yourself. Like you're like, "Yeah, I think I'll go to Dubai." Okay, and off you go. You just got back from the Galapagos where you chopped all your hair off, which looks super
Yes,
cute, by the
I
way.
did.
But just like, okay, I'm gonna travel to the Galapagos by myself. So is it your willingness to see the world? Or is it things like going back and getting your master's, even though you didn't need it to do the job that you were doing, just to further your education and say that you did it? Like, is it a combination of those things? What is it that taught you how to be the kind of leader that gets people to be successful in their space?
I've learned from really good leaders and I've learned from really bad
Ooh.
leaders. And when you have a really good leader that nourishes you, you're able to nourish others. When you have leaders that deplete you of your joy, you deplete others.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's what happens for all of us. And I think once you learn from those mistakes, you don't have to do them again. You can just go moving forward in a different way. But I think it kind of goes back to my sense of adventure and trying new things. So when it comes to my leadership style, I'll try different things to see what works with different people, read different books, listen to different podcasts, like whatever I need to do so I can equip myself to help others and to serve others. But same thing when it comes to travel, I have zero fear when it comes to packing up my bags and finding a new location and just going. The sense that I get, the sense of freedom, but also the sense of resourcefulness that
Mm.
I'm reminded every time I get on a airplane and land in a brand new place is so refreshing. And I think it's so beautiful. And I wish everybody could experience that every single time because you are reminded that you are so much more of what you do every day and how connections with people work so well, no matter what they speak. A smile goes
Mm.
a million miles when you're at a place where nobody speaks English or Spanish or whatever it is that you speak. And that resourcefulness, that going back to basics, where you have zero of your tools, but you have you and you are enough to be out there. It's one of my favorite things. So I just came back from Galapagos and it was absolutely beautiful.
So tell me your favorite thing about the Galapagos, because I got to go there when I was, let's see, I would have been 20 in college. It was a tropical biology class, and we went for 17 days and did Ecuador and all of that stuff. Keto, you were talking about. And then we went to the Galapagos and we're on a yacht for days, and it was just fabulous. What was your favorite part?
My favorite part was just swimming with penguins. I had never
Yes.
done that before.
Yes. Most
And
people haven't. I don't feel
most
like
people
that's a
haven't.
common thing.
And it's like, I'm like, but it was so beautiful to be so in touch with nature and
Mm.
to go back to just easy life with no television, with putting my phone away and just disconnecting
Yeah.
and coming back to normal. Because I think the amount of interactions that we have, the amount of media that we feed on every day, makes you forget that sometimes sitting outside and just breathing some fresh air grounds you, makes you feel better, and brings you back to nature. And that was beautiful. That was my favorite part.
So you said that they turn the power off for several hours
Yes,
a day.
yes,
Like, okay,
yes,
what? So, I mean,
yes.
it's one thing to unplug, but, like, literally no electricity, no running
No
water for
electricity for 6 hours every
every
day.
day.
Mhm. So if your phone was not charged, you're just sitting outside looking at the wind.
Yeah.
And that is, and after the second day, I was like, oh, I'm looking forward to the no power moment
Yeah.
where I
And
can
it was
just
in the
go
middle of the
outside.
day? It wasn't in the middle of the
It
night?
was from 12 to 6.
Wow. So they were
Yeah.
basically saying, "Get out and go do
Get
something." You
out and do
can't.
something. And it was sometimes you need a little push, and that was the push to get out and do something
Yeah.
every single day. But it was wonderful. It was
Oh, wow.
absolutely beautiful. And I felt refreshed and renewed. And those are the best vacations I feel.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, do you plan travel for others? Like, I feel like
I do
you need a
not plan
job in that.
travel other than my family. I
Yeah.
plan travels for them. But no, I don't. I do it for myself, and it's my favorite thing.
Oh, that's how
Um,
long were you there?
we were there for 9 days.
Who was we? Who did you go with this time?
So last year, I went on a hiking trip by myself to Sri Lanka, and I
Yeah,
met.
let's stop there for just a second. Last year, I went on a hiking trip to Sri Lanka by myself. Okay, well done. And then
And then in the middle of a hike, of this really high mountain, I'm a slow hiker. I live in Florida. We're flat. When it comes to a mountain, I'm not used to this. But I get to the bottom of I drove up to it. I was like, I can so do this. I can definitely do this. Let me get up there. It took longer than most people, but I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only slow person. So I ended up meeting two girls, one from London and one from Canada. And we became friends. And next thing you know, we were talking about doing another trip together and we went to the Galapagos together.
gosh, I just love it. I love
It's about connections.
Yeah,
Keeping
yeah, you are a poster
people.
child for connections,
Yeah.
for recognizing that you can't do it exactly the same way you've always done it and expect to get different results. You are willing to try new things and to inspire that in others. You are an inspiration start to finish. So I do have some rapid fire questions for you, but before that, people might want to just know who you are and just reach out to you and say, "Hey, I want to be gutsy enough to just go. Can you tell me more about that?" So what's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you, Altair?
They can get in touch with me through my Instagram. That'll be the easiest way. That's my name. Altair and underscore G for Gonzalez.
Okay.
And that'll be, and you can see all my travel pictures everywhere that I've been to in the last probably 10 years and see where I'm going next. I usually post a little bit about that too.
And Altair is Altair_G. Okay. Perfect. Well, you're just you're just fun. And so my first rapid fire question for you is what is your definition of fun?
Fun is when I get to feel my heart flutter.
Mm.
And that could be with any activity, something as little as sitting outside when there's no power, and that was fun, or planning my next trip.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, how do you know you are showing up as your authentic self?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I just show up
Mm.
and give myself some grace, whether I make a mistake or not, because it's just me. And knowing that I am so good just as I am.
Mm. Why did you learn that? Because I think most of the women I run into struggle with that, struggle with the worth that we have just by being. Who taught you that?
I think my family and just life, when you move to a brand new place when you're little, you have to find that worth within you because you're not
Mm.
going to get it from anybody else.
Mm.
When you speak the language and you have that barrier, you have to find it. You have to find that bravery in you to learn it, to make mistakes, and to know that mistakes are okay. Like you are going to make a million mistakes, and that's okay. That's that's not failing. That's just part of life.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that mistakes are part of life and we're going to make a million of them, it's like, oh, they're not that bad.
That's kind of fun. That's kind of fun to make that one. That mistake was a good one. Okay. How do you channel your best self on your worst days?
I work out.
Oh, yes.
I and this is new, Christy. This is
I'm
brand
so proud of
new.
you. I'm glad to
Oh
hear
yeah,
you say
this
that.
is listen. This is probably the last year.
Okay.
I have found that, and I've always known this is not new. This is not something I'm not discovering the world with this. But I've always heard other people, oh, I'm just gonna go work out. Feel really good. It's like, good for you. Enjoy that.
I'm going to be over here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stay in the silence, just watch you do it. I'm so proud of you. And then I said, oh, maybe it works for the entire world. I should try it.
Yeah.
And it turns out it is one of the most amazing things in the world. Like this morning, I went already to my boxing class and it was fantastic. So, and that just makes me feel so good. It's so accomplished in a whole different way that has nothing to do with my volunteers, nothing to do with what I do in my house or at work, nothing. It's just for me and it makes me feel so good. So
Oh, I
that's what I've been doing now.
fully relate to that. Well, and you mentioned your boxing class, which means that there's some connection happening there too. And you have
Yeah.
created a community outside of all of the other things that you do where these are my people. And I know that's for me. Burn Boot Camp has done that for me for the last 4 years. And I'm so grateful just to
Yeah.
have like minded people.
Yeah. And what you do for you, you don't do it for anybody else. It's just for you. And it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
New
Okay.
discovery.
Yeah, I'm so glad you discovered it. That makes my heart happy. Okay, last question. You have said so many powerful things in the last 30 minutes, things that we all need to be reminded of. Some of the things that you said were probably things people do, and others maybe they've never thought about doing ever, like going to the Galapagos randomly or Sri Lanka by ourselves. But what would be the one thing that you really want people to remember from this podcast?
So stay ready. Stay ready and not be afraid of taking that next step because it could be the most amazing opportunity you've ever had in your life. The same way that you stay ready to go on a trip, take the trip, take the trip. It's going to be amazing every single time. It's all about attitude.
Mm, mm. Well, thank you for taking us on a wonderful adventure today, the kind that is inspirational. I really want people who choose to listen to Productive Joy to walk away with something that they can use right away, something that will change the trajectory of their day or their week or their month. And I think you did exactly that for us. And I'm just so grateful for our friendship, and I'm so grateful for you making me better. Our conversations always bring something to light that I'm like, oh yeah, I need to be thinking about that. So thank you for being willing to share. And for all of our fabulous listeners, thank you for being you. This podcast is for you. And so anything that you are enjoying, let me know. Anything that you want more of, let me know. You can reach out to me on all socials. You can find Productive Joy. You can also just email me at learningcanstick@gmail.com, because that is the name of my book. And I would be happy to just say, hey, let's talk through what you'd like to be or what you'd like to hear on this podcast. So thank you so much for spending your time with us. And remember, our number one goal in our time together is to figure out a way to turn fun into action.